So first of all, very warm welcome everyone to this fascinating world of Agile. And thank you, Neelu, for organizing this. And I'm really grateful to all people who have joined here, especially this is the lunchtime for you all guys, and you have joined at this time. So really thankful. And I would like to provide the proper message, and I hope it should be worth for all of you, this session. So welcome once again. So Neelu has already provided my introduction. I have total 16 years of experience working with different technological companies. I'm based out at India. I'm currently working with Siemens as a lead technical writer. So I've worked with a couple of energy domain products. Currently, I'm working for an e-mobility product. And for my certifications, Neelu have already briefed, so I'll not go around that. I would like to talk about my work interest. So I really like to enable my end users. So by following my instruction manuals, whatever written instructions I prepare, so I would like to empower them. And I also like to contribute to product ideation process. And also, I like to always like to share my ideas, like for product ideation. So I present different ideas to different groups across my organization and outside also. In past, I have done some webinars in STC forum also, and now I'm doing here in this forum. And I'm also a diversity and inclusion champion. So for my local location, so I'm organizing IWD activities and the meetups, and so that people can better communicate, connect with each other. And what's important to me, never say yes when you want to say no. So that's the life motto for me, and never give up. So on these principles, I really believe, and I like to follow them. Moving on, talking about my product. So I'm working with depot management software. So basically Siemens is supporting the acceleration transition towards the zero carbon transportation. So as we all know, there is record breaking sales of the EVs, but still there is a need of robust charging infrastructure. So this product, basically, it manages the electric depots. So like in a nutshell, I would say state of charge. So the vehicles are fully charged or not to take up the trips. And if they are doing the duty cycles, are they doing it efficiently? So the complete fleet management, how efficient it is, and it helps in reducing the power cost. So there are several benefits. I have talked some limited use cases like battery optimization, utilization of the complete resources of a depot and fleet, efficient use of grid connection, load management, and smooth transition of a depot. Like we have a normal depots, and if they want to electrify the depot, so that smooth transition, this product supports a smooth transition of the depots. So this was a brief introduction about the project in which I have implemented the Agile documentation, and I'm working on this product. So moving on, so who would like to play the game of reserves? So for our game, so we want you to be equally engaged because this is very interesting topic, and we want you to be actively participate this. So for this, we have an app poll everywhere. So you can answer the question, and the question is, what do Agile projects and cheetahs have in common? So here on the screen, you see a beautiful picture of a cat. So now you have to, you need to download the application and you need to answer the question. And for how to use this application, I'll just take help of Neelu. So Neelu, maybe you can take over and give the, yeah.
Absolutely. So I just shared something with you in the chat, which is information about the poll everywhere. Okay, if you just arrived and you don't have it, go ahead and share it again. That's a link. You can also text it, right? You can text TE culture to 22333 and once to join the platform. Okay. So or if you're on your computer or you're on your phone, you can click or tap on the link there, and you can answer the question, what do Agile projects and cheetahs have in common?
Yes. Let's play the game of reserve. We all are a good fan of going to sanctuaries reserve. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Nice. We are getting good responses. So, yeah. Nice. Good responses we are getting. Let's see who is the winner. Which is the winner entry. Okay. They live in the present, speed. Some people say speed, some people say adapt. Both move at a fast pace. Yeah.
All right. I think,
Yes.
what do you say? It's up. Ready to move on?
Yeah, we shall move on now. Yeah. So I'll share my screen again. So thank you everyone for the interesting responses. I'm sharing my screen again. So what do Agile project and cheetahs have in common? So that was the question. I hope still you can see my screen, right? Okay.
We can see
Okay.
your
So
screen.
yeah. So very interesting responses I have seen. I have seen speed, agility, fast, adaptive. So all the responses. So the clear winner is agility. So this is actually agility is the right answer. So agility, this is what the cheetah does too. But do you know cheetah is the fastest animal on land? But when it do hunting, so it doesn't run that fast. So it can run at a speed of 58 km per hour. But when it is doing hunting, so actually it is not going that fast. So at that time, it takes time to react properly in effective manner. It takes time to strategize the situation. And also for agile projects, I say that our business environment is also kind of a wild place. Things are constantly changing. We have evolving requirements, new changes are coming up. We have new threat and challenges like jungle at every moment. You need to know when you need to stop and when you need to listen, when you need to strategize your whole strategy. And when it is safe, like for the agile projects, we need to see when it's safe to put on a sprint for a particular task. So basically in all, you need to be flexible, agile, and you should be able to react in the effective way. So both of the things are common. But for success, I won't say that speed is the most important factor. It is agility. So cheetah applies agility to get the proper hunt. So this was about one question about the agility, and you all passed the test. Very interesting responses we have got, and that shows you are actively engaged with the presentation. So now I'm moving on to the main topic. So welcome back again. So as you see, as there are a lot of requirements, software products are evolving, and we are working on SaaS-based offerings. So there are a lot of changes, and we work on the faster iterations. So it is imperative to talk about documentation agility, and also we need a faster clock speed for documentation also. So what happens, like the agile methods, agile manifesto or agile principles are well established for the development teams and for the people who are working on the codes. But for documentation, I see it's rare, or it's not at all there implemented anywhere. And nowadays for like software cloud-based offerings, there are faster iterations. We are working on the sprints, and developers are making small commits. They are committing small codes in different sprints. So the classic traditional document approach is not the final solution in the current scenario. So as we are following the pipeline structure, there is continuous integration, continuous deployment is happening for the product features. So similar approach is required for the documentation also, so that we can contribute towards the software delivery pipeline, and documentation can also walk like the coding delivery process. So for this approach, we need certain automation tools and certain approaches through that we can achieve that. So one is that if we achieve the agility framework, so through that we can have the continuous release process, and we can have the continuous documentation for the new features, so that customer also receive the information on time. And also, I would say it's a game changer, agile documentation development approach. And why I call it as a game changer, because when you are using the same coding tools to ship your documentation, to publish your documentation, you are saving licensing costs. And when you are releasing your minimum viable product, with that, if you are releasing your minimum viable documentation also, so you are actually making your customers aware, and there are improved chances that they can read your documentation. They'll be more empowered. Like let's say if you have released one critical feature, but there is no documentation around it, so how will the user oriented? So let's say once you have prepared the feature, and also at the same time if you release the feature documentation also, so the if impact will be very powerful. And also if you use the automated tools to generate your documentation, it will save licensing cost also, and there'll be consistency also across the project, that for documentation or and for the coding tools you are following the same approach. but how to do it. So I'll talk about it in further slides. So this was the importance why agility is important for documentation. Now, it's about agile documentation framework. Like we have the agile development framework for documentation also. There is a light framework which helps people, teams, and organizations to generate the business value. Basically, it refers to the practice of producing documentation following the principles defined in the Agile Manifesto. So, what happens? So, as per the Agile Manifesto, whatever principles are there, we can adapt in the Agile documentation framework and to contribute in the sprint. So the documentation team and the development team, they have to work closely in collaboration. They need to see the pace in which the development releases are aligned. So the documentation also needs to be aligned with that pace. So for that, the close collaboration will be required from the technical team and from the documentation team, so that we can produce a minimum viable documentation as a minimum viable product is produced. So it will be bare minimum documentation that will be produced, that will be given to the customer, that will be ready to use by the customer. So in the left-hand side, you see the agile documentation process. Like if the requirement gathering, if we start with the requirement gathering, so we'll create the first draft, and that for that particular feature, the review, you can instantly start the review process. And in traditional documentation approach, what happens, you prepare the whole document and then you pass on for the review. So that's quite late, and that's not going to match with the current pace of releases which we are following in the agile. So suppose there is a requirement change, there is updated requirement. So again, you can update your document and get it reviewed and create a final draft, and you can publish it. So that should be the flow for the agile documentation. Again, in the below table, so let's say in sprint one, if we take example, this is a sprint one, there is a small feature on which the development team is working. So along with that, you can align, you can draft your documentation for that feature one. And in the sprint two, if there are some changes, they are doing some bug fixing. So related to that updates, you can make in the documentation. So you see in sprint three, again, you are updating for different features, or you can update for the existing feature also if there are some requirement changes. So with every increment, you are able to work parallelly with the software releases. So as they are releasing, you can also align the documentation. So the whole purpose is that we can follow and strategize the continuous documentation principle by following this approach. Like in every sprint, there will be some documentation goals as well, so that we can deliver the minimum viable documentation to the customers to make them more aware and to explain them the powerfulness of that developed feature. So this is one benefit of using the agile documentation framework. Now I'll talk about principles of agile documentation. So agile manifesto has laid out agile principles that are followed by the software development teams. So similar principles can be implemented in the agile in the technical documentation also. But why? If we implement those principles, so we can have the enhanced user experience and it will be seamless. Right now for documentation, the experience is not seamless. What happens, we develop the features, but the documentation is happening towards very late. And then when we are releasing it, sometimes it's very late, and customer does not get that much amount of orientation in between. It's like, let's say we are doing some POCs for the features, we are doing UATs, we are showing them the concepts of the features, but there is no documentation in that process. But if we are releasing in every iteration, so in every iteration, the customer is getting education and documentation for that particular feature. And there are improved chances that the customer will use our new feature. And of course, it will generate more business. And also, I've seen some cases where it has helped in reducing the support team calls, because support team, it's like cost-effective process. There is cost for every support person. So if there is reduction of the support calls, so it also helps in cost reduction of overall product. So that's also one benefit of implementing this approach. Because if customers are empowered and enabled, so they can resolve some of the problems on their own. So principles of the agile documentation, individuals' interactions over processes and tools, as you have seen in the agile development approach also, like we prefer the individual interactions over the processes. It's not necessary to follow the process. So interaction is more important. KT is important. We should be able to transfer the knowledge within the team and other team members. Working software documentation over comprehensive documentation. So like when we are launching any feature, so that particular feature documentation should be available with the customer, and it should meet the objectives and the acceptance criteria for that feature. And we can generate it as per the acceptance criteria. And we can integrate our documentation to become a seamless part of Scrum Agile. So we can design our whole documentation process so that we can align with the Scrum Agile. So when I say Scrum Agile, so in Scrum Agile, whatever ceremonies we are following, like we have sprints for 2 weeks, 4 weeks. So based on that, we should also align with the development team, and we can have the same release management process for documentation also, so that we can have the releases at the same time. And we can, as development team, respond to the change over the fixed plans. So the documentation can also respond to the evolving changes. If there are evolving requirements, so the changes can also be made in the documentation also, and there should be no need of following a fixed plan. So in similar way, the agile principle can be followed in documentation. So this was one way of implementing or adapting the agile principles for documentation. Now I would like to talk about how you can implement the agile documentation framework. So in the right side, you see a high level diagram. It depicts the steps, what happens throughout for the agile documentation. So it starts with the initiation step. So this is a very important step. In this step, we are understanding the feature requirements, like requirement analysis. Who is the audience, and what is the expectation level? Are they okay with this approach, like minimum viable documentation, or they need the traditional approach? So in that particular phase, we will get the approval from the customers. We'll do the requirement analysis with the development team and product managers. So a lot of collaboration will happen in this process. Again, there'll be a dev team collaboration step. In that, we'll be taking inputs from the development team. We'll understand the requirements and the features. We'll study that. And then the actual writing will start. In actual writing, we'll start writing the documents. Then we'll get them technically reviewed from the development team. Like if it is like all the feature explanation is matching with the acceptance criteria for that particular user story, epics. So we are going to match with that. And then like if we are going to automate the process, so we can create the markdown or ASCII doc files for that. We can build those files in the repositories. In the next slide, I am going to explain the technicalities. And then we can merge that documentation file with the existing release pipeline. So whatever software development release pipeline is there, so with that, we can merge our documentation with that pipeline. And then finally, we can publish that. So this is the whole cycle, how we can follow the agile documentation framework. And during this process, we examine the required documents. Like in the requirement analysis phase, we have to see what are the required documents from the stakeholder side. And customer should agree with this approach, whether they need sometimes some customers have different requirements. They need a complete document. They don't want to follow that approach. So we should be having agreement with the customer. And we could also start developing product backlog. It's a very good thing if we want to show the efforts and if we want to organize our lives. So we should start contributing or maintaining the product backlog. So in product backlog, we can discuss with the Scrum Masters, and we can add relevant tasks with the feature stories associated with those feature stories to the product backlog, so that we can be part of that agile Scrum Agile team. That suppose if any critical feature they are going to develop, so there should be a backlog item for documentation also. Like suppose for the feature, if there is a user story, there should be a user story for documentation work also. So in that way, we can have our presence in the product backlog. And in sprint, we can work on the document for which we have discussed. And at the end, we need to evaluate our work, whether it is done according to the definition of done, it is meeting all the acceptance criteria. Then we can have the review with the stakeholders. So this is how, in a nutshell, the whole implementation process will happen for the agile documentation framework. Now, for the automation work, let's say if you want to automate your documentation, you want to like create markdown or ASCII doc files, you want to follow the CI/CD infrastructure to contribute to the pipeline. So I'll just touch base the documentation as code process. This is a complete workshop topic actually, but I will try to give a high level overview that how you can, if you plan to implement this, so what all things you need. So to implement it, like let's say in any text editor, you can write Markdown or SkyDoc files. These files are fully editable in any code editor. Code editor could be Visual Studio or could be any integrated development environment like IntelliJ. You can use those editors to read these Markdown or SkyDoc files. You can store in the same repository as source code. Let's say your development team source code, they are checking in Git. So in Git also, you can create your repository as documentation repository. Under that repository, you can save your code. Your documentation code. When I talk about documentation code, that are Markdown or SkyDoc files. And there'll be some backend script that will compile this SkyDoc Markdown content to HTML. And then CI/CD infrastructure pipeline, you can use, for that you don't have to do anything. In your development team, if you have any DevOps engineer or any person who is assigned with this CI/CD infrastructure responsibility, you can take help. Like in my project, I reuse the resource, and in that pipeline only, we can build and publish the documentation in our company portal. So you are saving a lot of cost in the same pipeline. Like let's say they are using Amazon S3 bucket for deployment process. So you can also use the same bucket, and you can ask the resource that in the same pipeline, he can build and publish the documentation. So this is one way of automating the complete documentation work. Like let's say if you use Word or PDF. So instead of that, if you go by Markdown or SkyDoc, so you have to write, these are very simple editors. You can straight away using them. And then you can edit them in code editor and pass on to the development team. And what are the benefits if you do documentation in a continuous integration delivery environment? First thing is you can contribute to the schedule pipeline. So like let's say for software deliveries, they are following the pipeline system, CI/CD pipeline. So you can contribute in that pipeline. So the Git, which is open source, it builds the documentation releases. And also you can use for the documentation side, nowadays there are some static site generators such as Sphinx and Tora, which generates a documentation site. So when I will show demo, I'll show the demo how I have generated the documentation site using these tools. So these tools are also open source, so you're free to use it. You can read these documents. There is good documentation available on Google about Entora, Sphinx, so you can quickly learn tricks and you can generate your documentation sites, and then you can automate your work. I'm not saying that you abandon whatever processes you are following for documentation, but still if you want to automate your documentation, so this is one approach. And you can basically publish and distribute your documentation without a license tool. That's the main benefit if you want to use it. Like every authoring tool has some cost, but if you want to go by open source way and want to implement the automation for your release documentation, so this is also one approach, using documentation as code. And technology stack is like, as I said, Markdown as SkyDocs you can use. Integrated development environment could be Visual Studio, IntelliJ. And you can use GitLab CI/CD infrastructure. Again, this is free of cost. And either you can use Python Sphinx utility or Entora. Entora is again open source. So you can use this technology stack to achieve this automation for your release work. So this was the high level overview how you can implement documentation as code. There are several tutorials, there are several sites on Google. You can just Google documentation as code, you will get several websites and you can read about it. Otherwise, you can also write to me. I'll be happy to share a session on it. Okay. So about my current project implementation. So I'm working for e-mobility product. In that product, I have implemented this Kanban board. So this is just a snapshot from there. So you see here that some of the tasks are in to do, some of the tasks are in progress. I'm also maintaining the backlog. So when I talked about the backlogs, in my backlog, there are some items. So if any product manager want to assign me some work, so I can, if I don't have the bandwidth, so I can show these kind of boards, and it also helps me to effectively organize my work and what all I need to take up in the coming sprints. So it's very effective, and we can align part of the Agile framework also. So this is one thing I have done, the setup of the Kanban board, and I have started attending Agile ceremonies for our documentation team. We are having stand-ups, we are doing sprint planning retrospective, and also we are attending the sprint planning for the overall project also, retrospective sessions also, so that we are the part of that complete Agile process. And as I talked about in last slide, we have implemented documentation as code approach, which is helping us to continuous integrate and continuous deploy the documentation. And this process is completely aligned with the Scrum Agile model, and we are contributing to the software delivery release pipeline. And the benefits, it has good scope of scalability, and also we can leverage the single source platform for the documents and for the features release also. So on the company portal, at the same place, we are having the launch of the features also, and for the documentation also. So there is a single source platform, so the users feel empowered and enabled. So at the same time, place, both of the things are happening. So this was about the current project implementation, the way we have done it. And so I would also like to talk about sustainability, how we are following sustainability principles in documentation. So first, I would like to talk about reduce what we have reduced. So like there were some user guides. So this work is apart from the automation work. So we were having some user guides around, it was having 800 to 1000 pages. So we have introduced some light user guides. So, we tried to identify what is unwanted, which some of the topics were not having any business value. So we talked to the stakeholders and the business users, and we identified those topics which are valuable and which are not valuable. So we just eliminated those topics. So now our guides have whatever is valuable to the business user. Now we have reduced from like, let's say if any guide is of 800 pages, we have reduced it to 200 pages. And some of the guides for the potential users, we have also created light user guides like of 25 pages, 30 pages. So it's going very effective. We are getting very positive feedback from the customers. Like whatever they want, they can just read it. They don't have to waste their time. And about the reusability, we are reusing the existing topics or documentation. We are just changing the look and feel, and we are trying to reuse the existing topics. If any, we are doing a lot of topic-based authoring. If any topic is required in any other module, so we are reusing it. And we are reusing the CI/CD pipeline, same bucket. So a lot of resources we are saving in terms of cost. We are contributing the scheduled pipeline. So also the reusability of development tools like we have Visual Studio Editor license. So we are reusing that concept. There were some already scripts were written to automate some work for the development portal. So we are reusing that script to generate the HTML files. So a lot of reusability is happening. And for the recycling part, like there were some user facing documents like that were not used by the customer. So we just changed the look and feel, and we recycled it, and we integrated in our live environment. So now customer is finding value out of it. Otherwise, some of the files were in Word, PDF, so there was no consistency. Now for the consistency purpose, we have tried to put it in the same format, and we have integrated at one place so that customer can read it. And we have aligned with the customer for the highest business value stories. Based on that, we have prepared the documents, and we have consolidated the old user guide topics and new user guide topics, and whatever is valuable, that's what we have kept after recycling for some of the documents. So this was about sustainability for the document, because you see, even like for the digital prints, for the digital documents also, there is some amount of pollution is there. And if you read it on Google, so even digital life also, it's also not carbon free, I would say. So from our side, we are doing a bit to reduce and reuse, recycle for documentation side. So this was about sustainability. Now I would like to show you the demo. I would do a new share. Just a minute. Can somebody confirm me if they can see my screen?
Right now, we cannot.
Okay, just a moment. Okay, so this is the company portal for my product. And here in the About window, there is one link for the online wiki documentation. If I click on this, so it generates the release documentation page. So this is the static site documentation, which has been generated using Sphinx. So for this approach, I have used MKDocs. This is Markdown based documentation. So I created Markdown documents, and then those Markdown documentation using a script, the HTML files were generated. So after that, those HTML files were integrated in the CI/CD infrastructure using Git tool. So you see here, it has a header, it has a beautiful left navigation bar, it has what's new page, uh, and also I'll take you around user documentation. So it has different topics. So you can browse around the topics, you can read it, and also it has a good search also if I write something here. So yeah, so it has capability of search also. So in all, it has capability to provide global search, left navigation bar, and you can actually organize your help topics according to your requirements. Like at the top, you can have what's new pages, you can have release notes, you can also integrate the PDFs inside your help topics. Like this, I have here implemented release notes here. So release notes link is also there, and it also has the archive feature. So like for your old documentation, if you want to archive it, so the multi-versioning thing that will also going to work here. So this was the demo for the documentation side. Now I would like to go back to the presentation. Do you still see my screen now, presentation?
We can see it, yes.
Okay, good. Okay. So you have already seen, we have understood the Agile documentation framework and why there is a need for agility, why we should follow agility for documentation topics, and why there is need to implement it. So in a nutshell, we know the requirements are changing because and we have evolving changes. We are working on cloud-based offerings, so there are faster iterations. So in that scenario, there should be continuous documentation also, because if we are shipping the code, so with the same cadence we should have the capability to ship documentation also. So in a nutshell, agility can help us to strategize to have the continuous documentation, and it would also help definitely to satisfy the documentation needs. And of course, customer interaction and acknowledgement of the different needs, it's a game changer. I would still say it could save a lot of cost. You can automate your processes, and you can become the part of the seamless agile process. You can make small incremental changes during each sprint, and so that the documentation is more reachable to the user. It generates a lot of business value. So when I say business value and business agility, so those are some powerful terms which are really important. So it provides like a lot of competitive advantage also in the market, right? For any product, there are a lot of competitors. So if you need to differentiate, so really documentation also helps and contributes a lot in that space. So with that, I'll end my presentation. There are some takeaways from this presentation, which I would like to recommend you all. Once you go back, so I would recommend you and really appreciate if you can meet your agile coach or scrum master of your team, of your project, if you have any. So you can discuss about the needs, and you can discuss about the agile principles, like how you can follow in your project, especially for the documentation team, if you're leading the documentation team or you are a individual contributor. So you can have a call with the person, or a face-to-face meeting. You can discuss the needs and see how the documentation can be positioned, or how you can align to be part of that Scrum Agile model. Um, and also from your side, you can start adapting the Agile processes, methods for the documentation work. Like one simple thing at least you can do, you can set up the Scrum board or a Kanban board for your documentation work. If you are a team or your individual can set up that board for yourself, because for the development, different development teams, they already have Scrum boards, Kanban boards. So similar setting you can ask your Agile coach to have for you. And in that documentation board, you can set up your to-do item in progress. So whenever you are giving your status to your managers or in a call, so you can talk with that Kanban board and have that start using that Agile practice. And you can, let's say if you're not able to follow the automation work for documentation, whatever approach right now you're following for the documentation, like let's say most basic, if you are preparing the Word documentation also, why not you start aligning with the incremental sprints. So let's say in any sprint, if any small feature is going, if you start documenting for that feature and start releasing it, just do one POC for one sprint and see the results, whether your stakeholders and the business users are happy about it. If they want to follow that process in future, so why not you can go about that and to be part of the this fascinating world of Agile. And also you can organize, or you can, if you cannot organize right now Agile ceremonies for your documentation team, you can at least start attending the standard sprint planning. That there must be Agile ceremonies for the entire project, retrospective sessions, sprint review sessions. So also sprint demos are part of the Agile ceremonies, and it's a great way to showcase your work. So why not you start demoing your documentation increments in those sessions, so that also give you good visibility in your team and in your project, and give you chances also to have the complete setup for the Agile framework for your work. So these are some recommendations from my side. You can start using that in your projects. So and watch out the results, and can also talk to me anytime if you need any help. And also we have amazing coaches from Agile like Neelu and Rick here. So anytime you can write to any one of us. So with that, thank you so much, everyone. I love to join here and really appreciate during your lunchtime you all have joined, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Garima. That was amazing. We do have a couple of questions in the chat. This is your time to ask some questions if you have them. We may, sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. She said something like, or you can use Autumn if you don't want to deal with code IDS. I believe she said that.
Yes. Okay, so if you do not want to use integrated development environment, yes, you can use Atom, but you have to see in Atom, you can open Markdown files or SkyDoc files. You can definitely try it out. Preparing a Markdown file is not a big deal. You can, in any notepad, you can save it as a Markdown file and try using it. I think I'm sure you can use it.
Wonderful. And then Yulong said, why not use Scrum board instead of Kanban board day?
Okay, so yes, good question. So you can use Scrum board as well. So in my last project, we were using Scrum board, but in this project, they are following Kanban board. So whatever approach the development team is following, so I'm also following the similar approach here. So that's why I have given the screenshot of Kanban board, but yes, you can follow Scrum board as well for this process.
Absolutely. Anyone who has another question, any comment you would like to make?